All right, so now I have my painting with my rocks, with my hat. All these things changed from when I started. And I'm only recording 500 history states, right? But I'm pretty interested and pretty happy with this. But what if I want to mess with just the overall finish of it, like the pixels and the way it looks? Because at 100%, that is what you will see in a printout. And it doesn't look like acrylic painting or, it would take something else to do that. So let me show you a few ways you can play with your overall paint surface when you're done. One way that I always recommend is just hold down Option, go to your top visible layer, and then say Layer Merge Visible, so that you combine everything onto one layer. Then, if you want, and you're brave, this is like framing your piece, you can go to the Filter gallery under Filter. And this is using algorithms built in by Adobe to mess with your work. And one that I sometimes use is called Plastic Wrap. I need to find it. Might be under Artistic. There it is, Plastic Wrap. I can shrink it down so I can see what this does. There you go. Now, I don't know what it's been in Photoshop for a long time. I don't know what its intended purpose is, but it is incredible how photographically it makes your pixels look like something dimensional, like melted crayon and wax. What do you guys think? And now you can play with this. Like, I'm not a fan of most filters. They look like a Chuck E. Cheese, draw your own portrait kind of thing usually. But Plastic Wrap, if I play with like the highlight strength, it suggests a three-dimensionality to your paint, which I think is fun. And so what I might do is say, okay, use that filter, but then blend it in opacity, right? So look how that evens out, all the different pixels. So then I can just blend it in opacity into what I had before, right? Or I can try a blending mode like soft light to intensify, or overlay, or pin light, which is the most subtle. Pin light actually doesn't make much of a difference. It's too subtle in this case. Linear light. Yeah, that's too much. So let me see if I do the darker color. The lighter linear burn, So I'm going to keep it on normal, but just take it down to maybe 40%. And you see how just gives a slight finish to everything. It's like putting a slight satin glow on each different paint stroke. It's another reason to do it on a white background, so you can separate out these effects from your background effects. The other thing I can do, and I'm going to do this again by holding down Option and then saying Layer Merge Visible, is I can take this layer, close my references so I only have one thing open, and separate it into halftone dots. So I'm going to do this pretty quickly because it's kind of complicated, but then I'll show you an action that I made that you can download from Dropbox to do it automatically. So let me save it just to make sure everything renders quickly. So I'm going to save this as my PSD with all these different layers. This is kind of my finished digital painting as of now, but I'm going to continue to mess with it because I think this will be interesting, playing with the difference between mechanical and digital processes. And right now it's 1.4 gigs. So what am I going to do next? I am going to flatten it. Flatten the image entirely. Remember, I saved it before. So I'm going to pretend that this is print ready, but not call it print ready, and just save it as a TIFF. TIFF with LZW, of course. Okay, so I've got that. Now, I am going to change its mode from RGB mode, it's under image, to Cmyk mode. And Cmyk mode is how the computer sees the color. So now I just changed it to how a printer sees the color. And if I go to channels, window channels, I can see that now it's not red, green, and blue. Instead, it's Cmyk, which means it's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So this is my black layer. This is my yellow with black layer. This is my magenta with yellow with black layer. This is how a 4-color inkjet printer. This is what this is what each ink would print, right? And then when all 4 inks, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black are together, you see the full color. Now what's interesting is when you isolate one channel. So if I isolate the cyan layer, notice it's no longer cyan in color. It's black. So what I'm going to do is take that layer and I'm going to convert it then, image mode, to grayscale, right? And it will discard all the other channels. I have to remember this is my cyan channel. Then I'm going to go to image mode and convert it to bitmap. And bitmap only sees black pixels or white pixels. And here I can say, what output do I want? I want a 300 pixel per inch output. No, I want a 350 pixel per inch output. I want it to match what I have. What method do I want to turn all these different grays into either black pixels or white pixels? I want to use a halftone screen, a mechanical screen like 4-color offset lithography users. Then I'm going to say, okay. Next, I have to choose the angle of that halftone screen. And so, and then the frequency. The frequency, 55 is fine. Maybe that's a little too small. I want these to be really visible, so I'm going to do 30. There's going to be 30 of these dots per inch. And then the angle, 45 is reserved for black. 0 or 90 degrees is reserved for yellow. 115 is a good one for cyan. And then the shape, I want a round. So then I say, okay. Now when I zoom in, it converts it. Now there's only black and white pixels in little round shapes at 350 pixels per inch. And there's my cyan layer. All right. Then, in order to make it cyan, what do I have to do? This is a bit of a pain. I have to go back to image mode and say grayscale at a 1-to-1 size ratio, so it doesn't change. Then I have to go to image mode and go back to RGB color, right? Then I have to select all the whites. I'm going to put and it shouldn't actually matter. I'm going to turn contiguous off, select all the white, and then say select inverse. So it's only the blacks that are selected. Because remember, there's only black and white pixels. There's no gray whatsoever because I converted to bitmap. And then I do edit, fill, and I have to pick a color. And that color I pick is going to be the cyan I use, right? And let's see, I want something a little bit darker. Probably about there. Okay, so that will be my cyan ink layer. Now I could just take that as it is, Command A, copy it, open up my Photoshop file, open recent, and then layer that into my painting. I'll show you what I mean. But that's just one color. Here we go. So what do? I paste it in, and then I start moving it down through the layers. I turn off my merged layers, right? And now I have cyan dots as part of my painting. You see how they're even slightly in the background. And I can play with the opacity and kind of sink it in, right? Move it up and through. And I can play with a blending mode. I can overlay them. So those dots, yeah, I kind of like that as a digital finish, right? Integrate into all the paint strokes just a little bit. And then I can decide, oh, I don't want the rocks. I don't want the hat. Right? You can see how they affect the face, these dots. And it can be a nice look. Okay, but what if I wanted to separate them into 4 colors? Well, then I can do that for each channel. So go back to my history here. Go back to when I started. Or let's see, when did I flatten it? There we go. So go to Cmyk color, and now I isolate the magenta, and I can do the same steps for magenta, going to bitmap, going to grayscale, filling it with, but luckily there is a shortcut for this that I created. So once you've merged and you've saved your flattened painting or file, I want you to go to actions, so window actions. And if you don't have this in your actions, you can get it from the class Dropbox. And I want you to find the folder, which is Karl's customized effects. Actually, we're not using that one. We're using the other folder, which is Karl's color separations. And then I want you to find within that folder what's called Cmyk full run. You select that action like it's a VHS cassette. You don't open up the cassette and play with what's in it. Instead, you just pick the action and then you hit play, just like you would on a VCR. And then you just click through. So when it asks you to do something, you say yes. And you get this at the end of it. And it's an offset of all the different ink layers. And they're offset from each other, meaning that you have to place them individually. But it's a great thing to play with. So now I'm going to take, well, I'll just break them down for you. So the black is on top at 45 degrees. The yellow is underneath that at 90 degrees or 0 degrees. The magenta is underneath that at 115 degrees, and the cyan is underneath that at 30 degrees. No, at 15 degrees. And when you layer them all up, if I use my arrow keys and kind of get them all synced, this is called registering. So I've designed my action so you have to hand register it. You'll see how an old kind of newspaper printing press would show your image, right? And then you can take all of those, copy them, maybe even put them in a folder, copy that whole folder, and put them onto your original. And this is just one of the ways I customize some of my digital work. It gives me something else to play with. So now in my Photoshop file, on the very top, I'm going to paste this thing. My action is actually at 300 pixels per inch instead of 350, so that when I enlarge it, it slightly softens the very hard-edged pixel dots. And this is, all at 100%. So now what I can do is go in and play with the opacity or just sink it in at different levels. So take the black down, take the yellow down, take the magenta down, take the cyan down.